Welcome to this episode of ASCOR Explainer series. My name is Setenay Hizliok. I am an analyst at the Transition Pathway Initiative Centre based at London School of Economics. In this episode, I will walk you through the carbon pricing area in the ASCOR framework. The ASCOR framework is built on three pillars. Each of these pillars assesses a different aspect of country climate performance. Carbon pricing is located under the second pillar as one of the climate policy areas. If you are interested in learning more about any other areas of the ASCOR framework, please have a look at our methodology note. In this episode, I will begin with a short introduction to carbon pricing, and then I will move to how we assess carbon pricing in ASCOR, and finally, I will share some highlights from our 2024 assessment results. Carbon pricing is a policy instrument that can support mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. When we emit greenhouse gases, either by producing or consuming fossil fuels, we do cause some unintended negative impacts on environment and society. These negative impacts include health problems, agricultural loss, and deforestation. Normally, those who are responsible for these external costs do not pay for them, but the society does. Carbon pricing internalizes these external costs by requiring the responsible emitting entity to pay for the social and environmental costs of their emissions. This way, it operationalizes the polluter pays principle. When there is such a price in place, it sends a clear signal to producers, consumers, and investors, and it makes them choose between switching to cleaner economic activities or paying the price of their carbon-intensive activities. Carbon pricing can be implemented in the form of a carbon tax, which is an additional amount paid for per ton of carbon dioxide emitted, or it can also be implemented in the form of an emissions trading system, or ETS. In such a system, the entities are subject to a limit on the amount of emissions they can cause, and they need to stay within their limits by trading the emission units or allowances they have. In the ASCOR framework, we have a dedicated area on carbon pricing because it is one of the climate policy areas that's commonly applied by governments to mitigate their greenhouse gas emissions and to meet with their nationally determined contributions targets. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change underlines that applying a price on carbon plays a crucial role in reaching 1.5-degree targets. Carbon pricing enables emissions reduction in a cost-effective and flexible way, and depending on how it is designed, it can raise additional public revenue, which can be utilized as transition finance. We assess carbon pricing with three indicators and two quantitative metrics. First, we assess if the country has a carbon pricing instrument. Then we assess if the country's carbon price covers at least 50% of national greenhouse gas emissions. The quantitative metric here shows the exact percentage of national greenhouse gas emissions subject to a carbon price. And finally, we assess if the country's carbon price is at least at the floor of a global carbon price aligned with Paris Agreement goals. And the quantitative metric here shows the most recent explicit carbon price in the country. So how do we assess these indicators and metrics? When we assess if a country applies carbon pricing, we look at all the carbon pricing systems implemented within the boundaries of the country. This includes carbon prices at the subnational level, such as the state-level carbon prices in the United States, at the national level, as in the case of Japan's national carbon tax, or at the supranational level, as we see in the case of the European Union emissions trading system. We assess subnational and supranational carbon prices as well because they also contribute to the total national greenhouse gas emissions subject to a carbon price. The share of total national emissions that the carbon price applies, as well as the price level, are important for the effectiveness of the carbon price. We assess the emissions coverage against a 50% threshold, and for the carbon price threshold, we calculate a global carbon price corridor aligned with the goals of the Paris Agreement. In 2023, this threshold was $75 per ton of CO2. This carbon price corridor comes from the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition, and the IPCC. For further information on how we estimate this price floor, please see the ASCOR framework methodology note. Introducing a carbon price and implementing it at a high rate can be ambitious for lower-income countries. To acknowledge this and also to align with the Common but Differentiated Responsibilities principle, we exempt low-income countries on this area, and we exempt middle-income countries on the last indicator where we assess the carbon price levels. The sources we rely on when assessing carbon pricing include national legislation and policy documents, but also third-party data sources such as the World Bank Carbon Pricing Dashboard, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and the International Carbon Action Partnership. According to our 2024 assessment results, almost 70% of countries apply a carbon price. 31% of countries apply a carbon price to at least 50% of their national greenhouse gas emissions. And among the 45 high-income countries we assess, only half of them have set a carbon price that meets a Paris-aligned price threshold. Now let's go a bit deeper and see what the quantitative metrics tell us. With this graph, we show the percentage share of national greenhouse gas emissions subject to a carbon price on the horizontal axis and the level of carbon price on the vertical axis. As we assess the middle-income countries only against the emissions coverage of the carbon price, we place them at the top of the graph without showing any carbon price level information. None of the middle-income countries assessed meets the 50% threshold. With 47%, Kazakhstan ETS has the highest coverage. And now you see the high-income countries assessed with the results on the emissions coverage and the carbon price level. Only those countries you see in the green shaded area have a carbon price that meets a Paris-aligned threshold and covers at least 50% of total national greenhouse gas emissions. If you are interested in learning more about ASCOR and explore the other episodes of the ASCOR Explainer series, please visit our website. Thank you for watching.